Yeah.
stage.
So to me, buying the first rental property together was actually the commitment, and to me it was worth a lot more than a wedding ring, because you know you can take the ring off and just throw it at someone, right? But when you've invested in a property together, you can't. That's commitment. You can't walk away from that one. You can't actually pick up the house and say, you know, take your house back, you know, whatever. So when it comes to property management, though. That's the next step in, you know, now you've got the property, now you've got to have, you know, think about property management. And that's where people meet that with fear. So, you know, people are really excited about investing in property, and then there's property management. So what are some of the things that people are scared about when it comes to managing properties?
Bad tenants.
Trashing your house.
Trashing your house, bad tenants? Pests. Pets? Oh, well, that one we're not, that one we're going to be able to not be able to avoid very soon. What else? Drug labs, what was it? Probably you're scared of property management?
Poor property.
Oh, poor property management. I mean, property managers can be really scary as well sometimes. Yeah, all of that kind of thing. Just trying to go, how do I use this? Do I? Nope.
Stand on one leg.
Sorry.
No, let me do this. Now let's try it again.
What do you press?
Let's look.
No.
Okay.
Well, if that's not going to work,
No, yeah, up.
you know what? I'm going to stand down here and change it. Right, that works.
Yep.
All right, so trash properties. Somebody said trash properties. These pictures came all the way from Darwin from a property manager out there. So that bottom picture is actually coffee on the walls. So somebody got a coffee pot or something and put it against the walls and left the property. This is one property, actually different parts of it, one property. Things like that can be pretty well cleaned up. I think this one was back on the market in a couple of weeks anyway. It looks bad, but they can be cleaned up, and this presentation is going to be about how to minimize this as much as possible. The tenants from hell. I mean, yes, when tenants don't pay rent or whatever, or trash the property, that's one thing. Sometimes they are psychotic. You know, and sometimes they are really unapproachable, and they don't damage the property. They, you know, they keep the property okay. They pay the rent on time, but they're really unapproachable. They won't let you in for inspections. They're rude. They're extremely demanding over little things. You know, and they actually cause a lot of problems in properties. Rent not paid on time. So usually when in Adelaide at the moment, there's a little bit of a shortfall between what you're getting in rent and what you're paying the bank. You know, George said about $150, $100, $150, whatever that is. But when the rent is not coming in, that actually causes a lot of financial strain for investors. So that is a cause for concern right there. Now, there are about five steps to correct property management. I'm going to talk about three of them. I'm going to talk about the three that are highlighted. But just very quickly, the second one, in-depth tenant induction. That is when you lay the ground rules of the tenant so you can actually minimize what's going to happen in the future. So anyone here have little kids? I know at least one person has. So when you've got little kids, you minimize them having a tantrum by explaining to them exactly what's going to happen. So if you're going to go into a supermarket and you know they're going to have a tantrum over wanting to buy all of the lollies and toys and, you know, whatever else that they see, you know, you can minimize that by sitting them down and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to walk into the supermarket. We're going to buy 3 items. We're going to buy bananas, milk, bread, whatever it is, and that is all. If you start having a tantrum and asking for toys and lollies and ice cream, I'm going to put you in the car and I'm going to bring you home. Is that clear? So the same thing, I'm not saying that tenants are babies, but The same, the same thing with adults. It works on adults. So, you know, if you explain to them that this is our arrears control, this is how we do it. If you default on rent, this is going to happen. If you trash the property, this is going to happen. And it's all set out for them, and it's in a book, it's in writing. Then you minimize the chances of anything being misinterpreted and the tenants going delinquent because they misinterpreted something. And the last one, a correct vacating procedure, means that you can't just walk into a property and say, all right, you know, get out now. Your rent is over. You know, there is a correct procedure to minimize the risk, and especially the risk of getting fined as a landlord. You know, fines can be up to $50,000 if a landlord does something wrong or illegal, or even if they don't know about it, the fine can still be up to $50,000 if you do something wrong. That's why you have a property manager. Okay, the first one, the careful tenant selection. So obviously the 100 points of ID, you always need an application form. Has anyone applied for a mobile phone lately? You know, and the paperwork that you go through for something that is worth to the company about $50, you know, and when it comes to something that's worth $1 million or $500,000, a lot of private landlords would just say, as soon as the tenant shows them the money, would just say, oh, here's the keys. You pay bond, you know, you give me 2 weeks rent and you take the keys and you go. Now, we actually take on a lot of properties from privately managed landlords. Now, I'm not here to slander privately managed landlords, because the ones that do it correctly will not use our services. So we see the ones that get it wrong. And we walked into properties where the landlord had no idea who was living in the property. They had been in there for 3 or 4 years. They didn't know the name of the tenant. They had never done an inspection. The carpets looked like there were drug labs or something done on there. The landlord used to just go knock on the door and get cash every week. The property was trashed and they had not been in there for years. So don't do that. You need to know exactly who's in your property. You check everything. You know, check rental references, you check employment references, and out of that, what do you think the most important thing is when it comes to screening tenants? Anyone have a guess? Employment is important. Rental records. So we actually want to see that rent has been paid on time in the past. So they might be earning $2,000 a week, but how do you know they don't have a gambling habit? Or, you know, we want to know even ones that have less income, we want to know that they have the ability and the financial education to actually pay rent on time, because that's going to go a long way in a rent default later on. Beware of discrimination, and beware of tenants that cause vacancies. Talking to other property managers, you know, have they ever restricted access to property managers? Are they really precious about the property? Because what we like to do is at the end of the lease, when the tenant says, I'm not going to renew this lease anymore, we want to get in there in that 28-day period before they vacate to show new tenants through, because that's going to reduce the vacancies. Vacancies are one of the most expensive things in a property when it comes to property management. So reducing that is going to go a long way to increasing and keeping your cash flow. Okay, how do we do arrears control? Yeah, I feel like that when tenants get into arrears too. So practice early intervention. So the law says that a tenant can be late in paying the rent for 14 days. So before you can issue them a legal notice. So you breach the tenants on day 15 if they have been in arrears. But before that, you start sending SMS notices, letters, phone calls to tell them that your rent is 1 day late. Your rent is now 3 days late. When are you going to pay that? To try and minimize them getting to that 14 days. Once they get to that 14 days though, a breach notice has to be served on day 15. There are no excuses for not serving a breach notice on day 15. The tenant cannot ring up and explain the situation. There is no explanation. They're in breach. They need to have a breach notice. And the reason why I say that is because we have picked up properties from privately managed landlords that have been in arrears for 3 years. And we had one that's been in arrears for 3 years. Not only that, but the landlord reduced the rent to try and help the tenant pay off the arrears. Because she kept saying, I'm going to pay it. We take things from privately managed landlords that, with all these letters and all this drama and emotion, and they're saying that the letters are going back and forth, but you promised me you'll pay it on this day, and you lied. We had one landlord that the tenant called the police on him because the tenant said that she couldn't pay the rent this week because she's sick. So he followed her into a supermarket to prove that she's lying. So she called the police, and he called us and said, my tenant called me creepy, and she called the police, and I don't know how to deal with it. Yeah, don't follow your tenant in. It doesn't really matter if they're lying or not lying. If they're in breach, that breach notice needs to be served on time. And guess what happens if you actually take the tenant to court, to SACAT? They want to see that a breach notice was served on day 15. They don't want to know that you've given them a 3-month chance or a 3-year chance because they promised. It's not about emotions and drama and promises. It's about taking legal action. Okay, there are 3 types of inspections that you do on a property. The first inspection that you do is called an ingoing inspection, and that is where our office will take up to about 1,000 photos of the property, and that is called the condition report. So we want to know every drawer, is it dirty, every wall, are there any marks on the walls, is it clean inside the cupboards, what does the oven look like? So up to 1,000 photos, because this is what saves your ass later on if the tenants do any damage to the property, because then you can compare the inspections before and after. Right, the last inspection is the outgoing inspection on the property. So again, you would go in and you compare the photos. So if that wall was pretty clean and it was not damaged, and then at the end there's a big hand mark on it, or there's a hole or something like that, you can actually look at the inspection and say that wasn't there before, so it was caused during the tenancy, and now we have a legal course of action on the tenant. Does that make sense to everyone? So you need those photos. Actually, we had one lady that had come through that had been privately managing a property, and the tenant had been in there for years. When we got the property back, there was knee-high rubbish. It was absolutely trashed. It was like the first photos that we saw. She didn't have an ingoing inspection, but it was actually deemed by SACAT that it was unreasonable for a property to have been leased in that state. So we were able to actually get some money back for her. But if the damage was a little bit less than just trashed, because a lot of the times at outgoing inspections, the properties are not trashed, they're just a little bit dirty. There's a handprint on the wall, or the oven's dirty or something like that, and this is when you need to take really care, like great detail, so that you know that the cleaning bill belongs to the tenant. The other kind of inspection that we do is a routine inspection. So legally in South Australia, you can enter a property every 3 months with notice, and you go through and inspect the property while the tenant is living there. This is not the one that you take 1,000 photos. You just go from room to room and make sure that everything is in place. So here we've got to be careful of bullying issues. So you can't actually tell the tenant that you haven't done your laundry, or you pick up your underwear from the floor. They are allowed to actually live how they want. What we look for is maintenance issues or people causing damage to the property. So we don't care about whether their dishes have been washed or whether their clothes have been on the line for too many days or anything like that, because you're breaching that line into bullying issues. You're bullying the tenant on how to live. So you've got to be careful of stuff like that as well. The graffiti effect, just very quickly. Properties have to be really impeccably clean at the beginning of a property. So anyone heard of the graffiti effect? So you have excellent, a few people. So the graffiti effect was, it was a bit of a social project where if there was graffiti on any kind of a building and the councils were very quick to clean it off, it would reduce graffiti later on, because you're sending a message to people that we don't want this wall or this building or whatever it is to be disrespected. Same with properties. If they are not impeccably clean at the beginning of a tenancy, and you guys have properties with us, we've always recommended a high level of cleaning right at the beginning of every tenancy, because if you leave handprints, it doesn't matter if they're just wear and tear marks or anything like that, but if it's obviously a handprint or something that can be cleaned off, it should be cleaned off. Because if you actually leave dirty windows and dirty window sills and handprints on walls and the carpet's a little bit dirty but it's kind of fine, it sends a subconscious message to the tenant that your property can be disrespected. Well, we're going to leave it like that too. And one handprint within one tenancy will turn into 10 handprints. And you won't be able to do anything about it because you've left the precedence there. So you want your property looking good, you need to have a high level of clean between tenancies, and some of it you can charge to tenants and some of it is just a landlord expense, because that's just an expense of having a rental properties. Okay, if you are using an agent to manage your property, you can expect some fees. These are not our fees, by the way. These are just arbitrary fees that we've taken off by looking at different contracts across South Australia. So need to be careful of fees. Don't worry about don't just look at the management fees, like they're charging cheap management fees, so therefore everything is cheap. You need to look at the rest of it. Are they charging? Some people charge for photocopying. They charge every time, I don't know, they email, so be careful of what you're actually being charged. Property managers can charge like lawyers sometimes. So make sure that you know what is costing you to manage your property overall as a percentage. And also be very, very careful of very cheap fees. Be careful of the agents that charge 3% to manage the properties, because when you add it up, you need 120 properties to actually afford a property manager's salary. So one property manager's salaries. So that means one property manager is managing 120 properties. What level of service do you think you're going to get if they're managing 120 properties? Shit service, because they won't be able to keep up with everything. Okay. When you rent a property, you are bound by the Residential Tenancies Act, and this is some of the basics. You need to provide the property in a reasonably clean condition. That word reasonable causes a lot of headaches in SACAT and magistrates court for us all the time, because somebody's idea of reasonable may be somebody's another person's idea of completely disgustingly dirty. So reasonable means like this room is actually reasonable. So if we removed all of the furniture and everything from in here, it will probably be pretty dirty. So reasonable means that a landlord or a tenant doesn't have to like scrub the grout between tiles, or go to that next level, unless you wanted to. We actually recommend that you go to that next level because it's an expensive investment and you need to keep your property in good order. Conduct the necessary repairs and maintenance. So if your tenant rings up and say, my air conditioner has broken, you can't just say, well, I can't afford to fix it, so we're going to leave it broken. There are actually strict laws against not doing maintenance. You don't have to have an air conditioner in a property, but if you have one, it has to be working. Right. there was a few years ago, there was a property that was going to come over to us from somebody who had just bought it, and they weren't using services like Positive Property that would look at all the details of your investment property and make sure that everything is in line. So there was a air conditioner that was broken in the property. It had been broken for about 3 years, and the landlord didn't want to fix it because they didn't have the money to fix it. And it was like that for about 3 years, and they decided that they were just not going to put up the rent to compensate for this air conditioner that was broken. Well, before our client actually purchased that property, we did a bit of a search and we rang the residential tenancies to make sure that the bond was in the right place. And they, just out of interest, somebody said, wait a minute, we know that bond number. I don't know why that rings a bell. Let me ring you back. So they rang back and they said that the tenant was actually going to put in a claim of getting $50 a week back from the landlord for a broken air conditioner for the last 3 years. So do the maths. It's just under $8,000 plus living in a motel in really hot days. So she was actually going for over $10,000 of compensation from the landlord, which would have been passed on to the new landlord if that was not picked up, because of that clause in the Residential Tenancies Act that the landlord has to take care of everything in the property. You have to allow for reasonable wear and tear, so you can't go into the property and say the carpet is worn out in common areas, so I want new carpet. That's not gonna happen unless it's actually damaged. Allow the tenant quiet enjoyment of the property. That means that you cannot go into the property anytime you want. This is all standard stuff, right? Everyone understands this is pretty standard. What the tenant is obligated to do is, again, leave the property in a reasonably clean condition on vacating. That's why you need that inspection report. Report on repairs and maintenance. So termites can actually eat through a property in 3 weeks, and apparently you can hear them in walls. So if there's anything, if there is any evidence of termites or anything like that in a property and the tenant has not reported it, the tenant is actually liable because they didn't report it. Pay the rent on time, not use the property for illegal purposes, not damage the property, again pretty standard stuff, and not bring any unauthorised pets into the property. That clause is about to be changed. Okay, landlord insurance, there are 3 types of insurance you can have on your property. You have building insurance, you have public liability insurance, you have landlord insurance. Please know the difference. If you take out a policy that is recommended by a bank that is called landlord's insurance, a lot of the time it is building insurance for a landlord, and they call it landlord insurance. The landlord insurance that we are talking about here is the insurance that actually insures you for the rental income of that property. So it insures the lease of that property. So if you've got a property and you're renting it out for $500 a week, you want to be guaranteed that you're going to get $500 a week for the term of that lease. So that means that if your tenant has gone to Melbourne and vacated the property and broke the lease, you need to be able to claim that difference, right? Landlord insurance, proper landlord insurance, and I'm not really allowed to say what companies we recommend. You can come and see me later. But there is no excess. There should be no excess on your rent default claims. The rent default is actually one of the biggest things that we put through to claim. So make sure that there's no excess. If they're using the bond as an excess, you may as well not even do an insurance claim. Right. Okay, things to remember. Know the law, be quick to act on proper. How long have I got, George?
Long time. You've got many time. I was going to ask questions later.
Oh, okay. All right, no problem. I'll go back. All right.
So what's happened is
we had a financial planner that was coming in today, but she's got COVID. So we're running early.
Oh,
So you can take your time.
All
Well, I'd
right.
like you to take your time. But also, once you finish, wouldn't mind asking if you do a bit of Q&A and ask you some
Yeah,
questions.
sure, of course.
Yeah, so don't take your time, don't
Okay.
rush at all.
Okay. Now that I know that. Okay, if you want to manage your property yourself, there are some benefits. Obviously, you've got more control. Obviously, there's no fees, and there are also some downfalls. So a lot of private landlords lack experience. The laws change all of the time. I think there's something like 32 rental reforms coming into Queensland, which will probably make their way down to South Australia at some stage. You need to be on top of what you can and cannot do in terms of legislation. Landlords are on top of, property managers are on top of legislation, or should be on top of legislation, and making sure that everything is done correctly. There are up to $50,000 of fines that a landlord can get if they do something wrong on a property, especially bullying a tenant, not using the correct vacating procedure, basically being an asshole. Will get you a fine, because tenants have certain rights, landlords have certain rights as well. Be careful of tenant compensation. Like, you know, if you offer the tenant a compensation, it will go a long way in doing that for you, because they will do that for you if you're not meeting certain requirements. Private landlords can be too personally involved in the tenants. The tenants just got this money and they just got this inheritance, and why aren't they paying the rent? And I know that they've done this, and I know that they're, you know, it's too much. It's too much personal involvement. You need to actually take it back to what's legal. You know, they're not paying the rent, you breach them. It doesn't matter what their financial situation is. It's not really none of your business. It can be time consuming. It is time consuming to also keep up with the law. Sometimes wrong contracts are used. We've seen that lots of times. The benefits of using an agent is that the fees that an agent charges are tax deductible. An agent should be more experienced than a private landlord. They should also use the correct contracts, and it's also a leverage of your time. You know, are you an investor or are you a landlord? Do you want to be an investor or do you want to be a landlord? You know, how are you using your time effectively? Some of the problems are that a lot of agencies are actually more sales focused than property management focused, and you know, a lot of the times the property management division of an agency is the toxic waste dump of the agency, because they just want to sell properties, and they just have a secretary looking after rentals, and it's not done very well. Communication problems. You know, we are known to not be very good communicators. I don't know why that is. Some landlords, some property managers do lack property investment knowledge, and we saw that during COVID, when property managers were getting on social media saying, we're giving all of our tenants free rent to help them with COVID. We're giving all of our tenants free rent. Whose money are you actually giving away to tenants? You know, that's property managers actually not knowing what their fiduciary responsibility is. You know, they're giving away other people's money. And also, if an agent does something wrong, it will be that they're doing something wrong on your behalf. You're still responsible for that property. So they're the risks of using an agent. Okay, choosing the right property manager. I would choose something who is focused on property management, not focused on sales. So somebody where the principal of that agency has a property management focus, whether they do sales or not. Property managers are qualified. They're using up-to-date contracts, which means the new legislation is actually in the contracts with the lease. Tenant databases. So that means that if a tenant has ever had a court order against them, has been in default in another state, owes money to a landlord or anything like that, they're going to be able to find that information using the tenant blacklist database. We call them blacklist databases. Make sure that your property manager does have some investment knowledge, not just considers you a rich landlord and you can afford this and this. If they have property themselves, they're usually somebody that would bat for you rather than against you. I think one of the most important questions that you can ask a property manager when you are choosing one is, tell me a time that something went horribly wrong. So, because everyone can say, oh, we handle rent arrears this like this and this, and we will breach the tenants on day 15, and we go in and we do inspections every 3 months. This is stock standard stuff. You do not choose a property manager on stock standard stuff because everyone is kind of the same. You ask them, tell me about a time where a property had been trashed by tenants. If they tell you that a property had never been trashed by a tenant in their watch, they are lying. So tell me the truth. Tell me a time where you walked into a property and there were big holes in the walls, like you can drive a truck through them, or they've taken out the kitchen, or they've pulled out the wires in the property, or broken in through the roof, or smashed all the doors. Tell me about all the domestic violence stuff that you see in properties, and tell me how you handle those situations, because that's what makes a good property manager. Not collecting rent and breaching the tenant and doing inspections. It is when shit hits the fan, how do you actually handle that? Tell me when you need to do an insurance claim because there's $50,000 of damage on a property that the tenant has done. They're pissed off, so they've gone and taken all the whole air conditioning, the whole ducted air conditioning out of the property. You've had to do an insurance claim. Who does the insurance claim? The property manager or the landlord? Because if they're going to hand it all back to you to do, then they're not actually doing their job in property management. If everything went right all the time, you wouldn't need a property manager. Okay. I think that was all for us. These are some resources. If you are managing the property yourself, the Office of Consumer and Business Affairs is a good one to call. That is my number there, and my email address. And this is actually some of our team being silly.
Okay, now we're going to do Q&A. Stop the microphone off. Hello. Push your button.
That one?
Okay. I'll push my button.
No.
Yeah, we'll do a bit of Q&A. So if you've got any questions, I've got a few questions actually. You may not be able to answer them, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Right.
Put me on the spot.
Yeah. So I'm just letting her arrive, put it on the spot. So if she doesn't get it, if you don't know the answer, that's okay. But I thought I'd ask. So with the insurance,
Yep.
right? Okay.
With the insurance.
Okay, 1, 2, 1, 2. Yep, okay. With the insurance, that's the one thing I'm curious about is what you mentioned, which was pretty cool because I've had insurance in the past and they took the bond out and they wanted the excess and then you're not getting much left anyway.
Yeah.
So getting one of those, is that possible? Is that easy to get? Someone that's going to not take out your bond and not have an excess?
Yes, there are actually 3 companies that we use. Your property manager should be able to get insurance for you. So they can actually get the correct landlord's insurance. And this is not building insurance, although it can be building insurance as well. So the correct landlord's insurance actually insures you for the lease. So therefore, the bond, you don't want them to actually take the bond as an excess. You might as well not even do an insurance claim if they're going to do that. If you want to be able to use the bond for non-insurable expenses.
Yep.
So cleaning is non-insurable. Neither is rubbish removal. Neither is gardening. So you want to actually use the bond for those kind of things because...
Right, but the deal is, one mistake was, and this is your property management company, I think, you should never go on a periodic, right? So anyone's got a periodic lease, have a periodic lease, you're actually, that's not good, that's bad. You want a fixed lease time and time again because then you've got more control, and they can't break the lease and you've got more security.
Have an excess on it.
There's no excess on default claims. There's an excess on on claims for damage.
Yep, but if the tenant is liable and you've paid for it, you can send them the bill, can't you?
You can send them the bill.
There you
I
go.
would have an argument with them at the
I'd
end
send
of the
them a
lease.
bill.
I would actually.
You can take it out of the
yeah.
bond when they leave.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when they leave, you know, I would accumulate it with everything else that you want to charge them for, you know, cleaning, whatever, blah blah blah, and throw that in there and take it all to, where is it? VCAT, Victoria, did you say?
No, New South
So,
Wales.
New South Wales.
Oh, New South Wales. So yeah, take it to their
Yeah, I mean,
equivalents.
insurance fine, but you just don't know what damage has been done to the electrical.
Yep, okay, so what I want to ask is this.
Yep.
I've got a few more questions.
Yep.
I guess the number one thing we're all interested in is how do we maximise our rent and how do we know we're getting the right rent? Because I've spoken to a few people around here and I know one or two people here, their landlord didn't put the rent up how much they should have, because I know for a fact, in Queensland especially, rents have gone up $100, $200 a week. And I know people in this room, they only went up $30 or $40 a week.
Yeah.
And that's really terrible. And can you do something about that? I mean, the landlord, the property manager, what a dick. Excuse the language. Serious. They're not doing their job. What are we paying them for?
Yep. Rents have gone up really significantly now in South Australia. More in Queensland, but in South Australia they've certainly gone up. Now there are two issues. If the property is vacant, it's like name your price, and we'll try and get it for you. If the tenant is living in there though, you need to back it up with a comparative market analysis.
Yep.
And the comparative market analysis doesn't reflect what you can actually get on the market. So I'll give you a real life situation, right? So we had a property that was rented for $450 a week. It was a 5-bedroom, huge house. It was $450 a week. The landlord said to me, "How much can I get for it right now?" And I said, if you were going to increase the rent to the same tenant, I wouldn't go, I'll put it up to $500 a week, right? However, if the property is vacant, I want to try $750.
Wow, what a difference.
So he said, yeah, okay. He goes, I'm feeling greedy, get rid of the tenant,
Yeah.
right?
And-
So we did, and we got $750.
But getting rid of the tenant,
But-
is that easy or hard?
Well, it was coming to the end of the lease anyway.
So you just don't renew the lease?
Yeah, you just don't renew
Wow,
the lease. Yeah,
there you
yeah.
go, guys.
No, this was towards the end of the lease. So,
Boom.
so we did. We vacated the tenant. We
Yep.
put it up for $750, and we got $750. But there is
High five.
there is
Well done.
there is a risk of putting it up by $300 with the same tenant in there, and the risk is that they will run to the news. They don't want
I'd be
that
happy
kind
to
of
go to the
drama.
news for that. I don't mind. I don't mind. I'll do it. One of my property went up 150. Maybe we should ring them up. Go, hey, go to the news. Get me for free publicity.
Yeah.
I don't mind. I'll say, well, actually, I probably could have gone up 200. I've done them a favour. Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah.
If you've got a property and
Here's the mic. Here's the mic. Yeah. Otherwise, the recording.
Hello. If you've got a rental property and let's say that in that area it goes up say $100 a week and you're employing somebody to look after that property, is it your responsibility to go to them and say, hey, we need to put it up, or should they be ringing you saying rent's going up, you need to redress this?
They should actually be doing a comparative market report every year just before they put up the rent. So they should actually be contacting you saying, this is what the rent is in the area, what would you like us to put it up for? Now keep in mind that agents can only tell you what is in the area. That doesn't mean that you can't go higher than that. But yeah, it is your duty as a landlord to say, if they've recommended, you know, it's $350, it should be $400 to $450. You can say to your agent, renew it for $500.
Yeah, exactly. Now,
And see what happens. These are my instructions. So a property manager can only take your instructions.
exactly. Now, I love that question, and I've got a really good answer. That's even better than that.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is. 2 years ago, Xenia and I did a full training on how to get the most rent and how to do the comparatives. It's in our training portal, part of the 14-day challenge. So if you, I'll try to find the name, but if you go in our, everyone listening here, if you want to find out how to do this, we actually got a nice training, even a worksheet, and shows you exactly every step by step on how to do your own comparative market analysis. And I suggest what you do is put in your diary when your rent's due, And I would 2 months beforehand do that myself and email my agent and tell them what to do, because at the end of the day, remember that thing, cause and effect? Who's responsible for the rent you're getting? We are. And that's what we're going to take control, because if you leave it up to the the property managers, and I've done that in the past, they get slack after a while sometimes, and not everyone's as like Xenia, who's very forward thinking, and they just don't put the rent up. Because what I do, one of my policies is, every single time there's a new lease, the rent is going up no matter what.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.